No niin, lähteet tulee!
Asettaa!
Every year, UN publishes a report on global happiness, and it ranks different countries around the world on how happy a country is. And the last 6 years, my native country of Finland has been the happiest country in the world. And this is actually kind of shocking to anybody from Finland if you ask them, are we the happiest people in the world? Because like, we don't smile a lot. It's a very stoic country. And that begs the question is, why is Finland such a happy country? And in this video, I hope to explore that and hopefully install you with some insights on what can you learn from Finland to your own life to be a happier person. I've seen a lot of press articles on why Finland is the happiest country in the world. It's usually written by people who've never been to Finland or they just read about Finland. It sounds like an awesome society. Free educational system, no homelessness, public transport, you know, very clean, a lot of nature, this and that. But if you go to Finland, particularly in November when it's the slush season, you don't see a lot of people smiling. So when people ask me, like, Tero, what do you think why Finns are the happiest country in the world? I actually kind of turn it around and say, I think Finland might be the least unhappy country in the world. In Finland, we have a proverb that kind of translates into like, happiness is a place between not having enough and having too much. And I think that is kind of telling from the mindset of how Finns think. If you're in the lack of, i.e., let's say you're homeless, you don't have enough food, you can't do your basic necessities, you will be unhappy. In Finland, this is not really an issue. There's basically like, if you're homeless, it's by choice. You will be government will provide you a house, partly because it's so cold in the winter, it's important, otherwise you might die. But also you get free education for everyone. There's all kinds of social support systems. So like the safety net is there and there's a lot of support in many ways that prevent from the worst case scenario. And in America, it's the opposite. It's the Wild West. Like it's very easy to get homeless. The opposite though is like, what are the expectations? In America, anything is possible. It's the American dream is you can go from nothing to having everything, but that raises your expectations versus Finland is a little bit of a, for better or for worse, a tall puppy syndrome. Funny fact about that is that in Finland every year they publicize people's tax records. So you can see how much your neighbor made money and how much taxes they paid, which is kind of crazy to a lot of other countries. But it kind of keeps people, the top, also in control, which allows for a bigger group of population to be happy. They're not in the lack of, but they don't have too much. So besides this very philosophic way to think about what do Finns do right, or what can you learn from the Finns to your own life, I have 5 tips as a Finn that I think more Americans could leverage. The first and by far the most important one is nature connection. Finns spend ridiculous amounts of time outside and in nature. You're basically never more than like a couple hundred yards away from nature, wherever you live. And this is particularly true in the summer. You have fairly long summer vacations, like 2 months, and you spend it in the cabins. You go into houses these little summer cabins that might not have running water or barely have electricity, and you live there in nature. And that connection with nature, combined with sauna, cold plunges, cross-country skiing, and picking mushrooms and berries in the forest, I think is a way to feel grounded and happy and connected, and also have perspective on where we come from. I think this nature connection, however you achieve it, is a source of happiness and is a source of lack of unhappiness. And I think you can find this in the US too, in smaller communities. So these, I think, is something that we can take, is be more outside, be more in nature. And I think this is especially important for young children. The second thing that Finns do pretty well is coffee. Finns drink more coffee than anyone else in the world. Like, it's not uncommon to drink 8 or 9 cups of coffee. And this sounds insane, right? It's like, the brews are a little bit lighter than here in the US, so it's not the exact apples to apples comparison in caffeine, but people love the sense of having a coffee. But besides just the coffee is a social interactions. Finns are bilingual, so we speak Finnish and Swedish, and the Swedish word for it might be better than the Finnish, but it's called fika. but it's like a moment when you meet up with a friend over coffee. It's kind of like a break from work and life to catch up with your community over a sense of coffee. And that coffee is a little bit of a pick-me-up, makes you feel better, combined with the social interaction. So the idea of like sitting down and having coffee with community, the ritual coffee can be replaced with something else if you don't like it, but the fact of having antioxidants, a pick-me-up combined with community, I think is very powerful. And then you could tie that with chocolate and other things as well. Third reason why I think Finns are very happy is the safety net. And again, it's less so like it makes people happy, but it prevents unhappiness. Finnish healthcare is not perfect. For example, if you have a dental issue and you want to have a dentist, you're probably going to have to use a private dentist. When I was a kid, we would only use public everything, and the waiting times got too long. So don't believe all the hype. Finnish healthcare system is not perfect by any means, but the idea of having that safety does prevent people who get into a difficult life situation. And I think that is helpful for happiness. So in your case, maybe you could think of like, do you have funds set aside for yourself, or do you have community that could take care of you through a religion or where you live that could take care of you as a safety net? The safety net doesn't need to be provided by the government. It can be provided by other forms of community. The fourth reason why Finns are happy is that they are not trying to be too happy. It's almost that pessimism is the tool for happiness. And most famous Finnish proverbs are about not trying too hard or trying to be too ambitious, which hurts my soul as an entrepreneur. But it does help keep the expectation lower. Again, if happiness is reality versus expectation, by lowering the expectations or keeping the expectations realistic versus trying to have the latest and greatest car because your neighbor has it, or the holiday, or this and that, buy the material, that will set expectations higher, will make, on average, people less happy. So having moderate expectation and pessimism actually helps in this case. Fifth, and probably the most controversial opinion why Finns are happy, is that Finns are pretty pagan. And this sounds crazy and almost like you shouldn't say it out loud, but Finnish people are not that religious. It's one of the least religious countries in the world. And a lot of the religion that is still there is very habitual around like getting married and getting buried in a cemetery. So there isn't like a lot of those traditionally Judeo-Christian traditions that are a big part of the society, but there's a lot of pagan traditions that again help usually with the nature connection and like sense of self. And there's a lot of these weird beliefs that are subconscious, kind of under the surface in the Finnish culture, that are helping people to have a sense of being and purpose without organized religion. And I think organized religion is probably better than nothing for happiness because of the sense of community and support, but at the same time, it can hurt beyond a point. So having these more ancient beliefs about nature kind of does serve some of those same needs without the negatives of organized religion.
Moro. Mä teen tätä YouTube-ohjelmaa nyt. I bet you've seen in the news that Finland has been now chosen 6 times in a row the happiest country in the world. As someone living in Finland and who grew up in Finland, why do you think that is the case?
That's a very good question. I mean, I've been living in a couple of different countries, but yeah, moving back to Finland after those trips, so I value personally the nature. It's very clean here. We have a lot of privacy. I think those kind of things, it's nothing fancy here. It's just like very modest, very clean, safe.
And Finland was not always the happiest country in the world. It was one of the poorest, had the highest suicide rates when we were kids. Talking about that often when I bring people up the point that Finland is the happiest country, a lot of people remember that Finland had a lot of suicides particularly in the 90s, and that's kind of sounds like the opposite of being happy. What are your thoughts on, do you think that the suicides rates, in your opinion, used to be higher and now it's less of an issue, or do you still think Finns are depressed and unhappy people?
Unfortunately, I don't have the exact numbers, but this is my personal opinion on the topic. You were first asking me like, what is the number one, or what are the reasons why Finnish people are so happy? Now when we're doing this call, it's pitch dark outside. I can literally see nothing. It's super cold, and the dark period of time, we have like 4 beautiful seasons, but the dark period is really, really depressing.
The darkness is pretty rough. Last time I was living this time of the year in Finland, I remember there was 2 hours and something like 40 minutes of sunlight in all the month of November. So it's pretty rough. The more cheeky people would say that that's why Finland is now so happy in the last 6 years, because all the unhappy people killed themselves, which is, but I would say also that kind of takes back to the dark humor. I think Finns have a very dark humor and love for heavy metal. And I think that also keeps the expectations lower.
What do you mean, what humor?
Yeah, exactly. I think that in a way, the dark, pessimistic way keeps expectations lower, which also keeps you happier, because, you know, the pessimist is never disappointed.
Yeah. But I'm a huge fan of Finland, and I promote it everywhere I travel, and I say this now as well. I use the chance that Finland is a great country. If you ever have a chance, you should absolutely visit the happiest nation in the world.
Yeah, preferably in the summer. Thanks, man. This was helpful. Thanks for sharing your thoughts.
Finally, in order to be intellectually honest, I feel like I should tell you 5 things that are not so great about Finland that almost never get mentioned in this context, and also shows that Finns are not perfect, and also gives some warning signs about how Finns behave that you can also take into account. Almost all of these press articles are only about the positives about Finland, so I want to give you the real. First of all, roughly 10% of people are on antidepressants, just straight up, and another more than 10% use other forms of pharmaceuticals. So not everybody's happy. There's the darkness of Finland, especially like the lack of light in November to January, February is pretty rough. And it can get really seasonally depressed. The safety net that is a positive to some people is also limiting happiness of other people. It prevents risk-taking. And I personally believe that a lot of our happiness in life is taking risk and going for it and stretching ourselves. So if there's not stretching and there's just comfort all over, similar to the US with the convenience of fast food and whatnot, it will make us less happy. We need adversity, we need challenges. And I think in the Finnish society, sometimes people lack that. Third secret nobody talks about Finland is men do worse than women. Women actually now still rank very high in education, whereas men are starting to rank, or boys are starting to rank worse and worse. And men struggle with depression and suicidal thoughts a lot more than women. Maybe they don't have the support network from friends and the tools to deal with it. Finnish men are like manly men, and they don't talk about their feelings. There's a saying that we don't talk or kiss. It's just very stoic way to approach things. And I think that hurts people when they have struggling. Case example, my father had cancer, and I didn't feel like he had anybody to talk to about it. It was very hard for him to express difficult, challenging feelings, and men in the Finnish society struggle versus I think women thrive much more. The other thing people don't talk about Finland is that it's not very diverse, and it could be occasionally racist, particularly in the countryside. Less so like consciously racist, but more like, hey, these people have never seen other religions and skin colors and races except in TV, and they're not used to it. But it's not very diverse, and there can be some limiting thoughts around people, again, particularly in the countryside where I grew up. And the last thing about Finland, which can actually be a positive, is the weird sense of humor. Finns have a very, very dark sense of humor. Finns love heavy metal, weird jokes about really nasty stuff, anywhere from like children to like, I don't even want to talk about it. I think YouTube will censor this, but like the Finns have a very weird sense of humor, and it's very, very dark. And I think this darkness can actually, again, anchor the expectation and happiness and being grateful, but it also can, like, it's self-deprecating often and can fuel, if you're unhappy, further the unhappiness. And then for some people, it can lower expectation and make you happier. So it's kind of a plus or minus. So that's it. That's the real on Finland from someone who grew up in Finland for more than 20 years of their life and spent the last almost 20 next years living around the world, including almost 10 years here in the US. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you found something. Maybe there's something you can take into your life about nature and community and maybe the weird sense of humor, and embracing those things. And maybe through that can make your life happier too. Leave a comment below. What are your thoughts? If you have any experiences with meeting Finns and Finnish people, what have been your experiences in connecting with Finns around the world? I'd love to hear that. Thank you, and see you in the next video.